Before the Pacific War, the British and the Americans believed in a myth that their aircraft production, design, and fighting ability were vastly superior to that of the Japanese. Their beliefs were rooted in arrogance, racism, and a general misconception of Japan. It was a brutal awakening for them at Pearl Harbor and the ill-fated Force Z. The Japanese had unleashed a seemingly secret weapon. As John Dower said, "It was not so much the success of the Japanese Navy in shrouding the Zero in secrecy that made its sudden appearance against the Westerners so shocking in December 1941, as the blindness of the most high-ranking Allied officers, who simply could not conceive of Japan independently designing and manufacturing an aircraft of this caliber." This episode is on the A6M Mitsubishi Zero fighter. This video is sponsored by our YouTube members and patrons, who get 2 exclusive videos weekly, not available anywhere else, for their kind support of our channel. You can join their ranks to watch more than 160 videos, including our series on the Pacific War, Punic Wars, Persian Wars, Spanish War of Succession, Russo-Japanese War, North African Campaign of World War II, History of Prussia, Italian Unification Wars, Risorgimento, Albigensian Crusades, and much more. Click the link in the description or pinned comment to get the exclusive videos, early access to all public videos, our schedule, wallpapers, access to a special Discord server where we're very active, and much more. Thanks for supporting us, we couldn't be doing it without your help. In April 1932, the Imperial Japanese Navy sought to replace their carrier-based fighter, the Nakajima A2N. They requested Nakajima and Mitsubishi design its replacement, and both competitors submitted monoplane designs. Nakajima submitted the Nakajima Type 91 Parasol Wing Fighter, already in production for the Imperial Japanese Army. Mitsubishi submitted the Mitsubishi 1MF-10, Japan's first low-wing cantilever monoplane, designed by a team led by Jiro Horikoshi. Horikoshi graduated from the newly formed Aeronautical Engineering Department of Tokyo Imperial University in 1927, and quickly joined Mitsubishi. In 1929, Mitsubishi sent Horikoshi to work at cutting-edge aeronautical companies in Germany, the UK, and the US. Within 5 years, he would be appointed chief engineer of a development team based in Nagoya. His first significant project was the Mitsubishi M1F-10, an all-metal construction with fabric covering duralumin wings and a monocoque duralumin fuselage with an open cockpit. It sported a Mitsubishi A4 two-row 14-cylinder radial engine and made her maiden flight in March of 1933. However, the prototype was destroyed in July when its tail broke up during dive testing. The second prototype revised its undercarriage, but it also saw destruction in June 1934 after failing to recover from a flat spin. The design advanced, but ultimately the IJN rejected it because it did not meet their needs and had rather poor handling. In 1937, aircraft from carriers Hosho, Kaga, and Ryujo, and airfields at Taihoku, Formosa, and Kyushu raided the cities of Hankou, Nanking, and Kwangti. Their aircraft suffered heavy losses when intercepted by fighters of the Republic of China Air Force, prompting the IJN to replace their aircraft with an experimental one. The A5M was a single-seater, all-metal, low-inverted gull-wing fighter with an open cockpit and a fixed undercarriage. Horikoshi's team developed it using aspects of the failed Mitsubishi M1F-10. The IJN requested an advanced fighter in 1934 that could reach speeds of 220 miles per hour and be able to climb 16,000 feet in 6.5 minutes. The first prototype was powered by a Nakajima Kotobuki 5 radial engine and had its first flight test on February 4th of 1935, achieving a speed of 280 miles per hour, impressing the IJN. A second prototype was improved upon before it was ordered into production. The A5M was tested at Kakamigahara Field by 9 pilots of the Genda Circus at Yokosuka. The IJN's priority was for high maneuverability required for dogfighting. Pilots such as Petty Officer Mochizuki Izumu practiced hineri komi, falling leaf maneuvers against foreign designs. The A5M outperformed them all, including the Type 95. Though still officially under consideration, the urgent need for the China War overcame caution. leading the carrier Kaga to return to Sasebo to grab A5Ms and deliver them into combat. It held greater speed, climb rate and range than all of its opponents. On September 19, 1937, Chinese fighters intercepted a carrier-borne dive bomber attack, expecting the usual easy pickings, only to be annihilated by 12 A5M escorts. The A5Ms were so successful, the unthinkable occurred. An IJA commander admitted the IJN pilots were as good, if not better than, his own. On December 2nd, the A5Ms destroyed 10 Russian I-16Bs without a loss. However, the one-sided air war took a turn in April of 1938 during an aerial duel over Hankou. On the 29th, 31 I-16s and 36 I-15Bs intercepted 18 G3Ms escorted by 27 A5Ms. The Chinese and Soviets claimed to have shot down 21 Japanese aircraft, while the Japanese claimed 40 downed enemies. Regardless, they withdrew to Chongqing, and air raids began against Chinese cities from Canton to Lanzhou. However, the A5M's limited range did not allow her to participate, leading unescorted bombers to suffer at the hands of Chinese and Soviet fighters well into 1940. The IJN required a new fighter with greater range, and with 6 years of combat experience in China as their matrix, Horikoshi and his team set to work again. On October 5th of 1937, Lieutenant Commander Hideo Sawai presented planning requirements for a future Prototype 12 experimental Shisaku fighter to both Nakajima and Mitsubishi. The new fighter was required to exceed the opponent's fighters and also escort long-range bombers into the hinterlands of China. There was also pressure on its dimensions, as the new breed of IJN carriers had smaller tonnages and dimensions than the Akagi and Kaga. Its speed needed to be increased, as the A5M was being outdone by the I-16, which could push 326 miles per hour. The IJN required a climb rate exceeding 9,842 feet within 3.5 minutes, and the aircraft would be fitted with an oxygen inhaler, a pair of 7.7mm weapons, two 20mm Type 99 Model 1s, Mk3 Dai Nihon recoil cannons, the combat battle-tested Type 1 Ku Model 3 radio, and she would need to be able to carry a pair of 132-pound bombs in an overload condition. All of this added considerable weight. The greatest hurdle for Horikoshi's team was that Japan lagged behind the other great powers regarding aircraft engine design and construction. Available to them at this time were 3 home-produced twin-row 14-cylinder air-cooled radial aircraft engines: the Nakajima 950 horsepower Sake A12 engine, the Mitsubishi 875 horsepower Zuisei 13 engine, and Mitsubishi 1070 Kinsei 46 engine. Nakajima studied the project requirements for 3 months and dropped out of the competition, stating it was impossible. Horikoshi's team had the same reaction initially, but took up the job nonetheless. Horikoshi knew choosing the Kinsei over the Zuisei engine would give the most power, but it was heavier and larger than the other 2 options. The Kinsei would result in a 6,614-pound aircraft with a larger airframe, wing and tail size unfit for carriers. The Zuisei would produce a 3,527-pound aircraft with smaller designs for carriers. Horikoshi was forced to sacrifice power for weight and size. Having chosen the engine, Horikoshi set to work designing an aircraft that would have fully retractable landing gear for low drag, a new low-wing planform with a straight taper and narrow tip, replacing the popular elliptical shape with matching horizontal tail designs of other aircraft. The wing format was critical, as it had to be thick enough to accommodate port and starboard internal fuel tanks, and her 20mm cannon. Horikoshi appointed Sadahito Kato to design a retractable undercarriage and stowage, Yohimi Hatakanaka on the 20mm cannon mountings, and Yohitoshi Sone for the wing dimensions and structure. The prototype Shi-12 was built by a 5-section design team covering structure, propulsion, armament, computing and landing gear for an agonizing 10 months as they wrestled the weight and performance issues. During this period, they produced 3,000 detailed drawings, which were checked, modified and approved. Isamu Igarashi developed a major innovation, and Yasuki Ozeki, a lightweight but higher strength zinc aluminum alloy, dubbed Extra Super Duralumin, in 1936. American historians claimed this was a copied US material, but it was a German invention used in constructing frames for Zeppelin airships during World War I. A Zeppelin was shot down near London, and a Japanese military liaison officer stationed there sent a fragment home to be analysed. Horikoshi eagerly incorporated the metallurgical advance into the design, saving an estimated 66 pounds of weight. The most glaring omissions for Western minds were that the aircraft lacked armour protection for the pilot and self-sealing fuel tanks. It was necessary to make the aircraft lighter, more manoeuvrable, and with increased range. In truth, neither the IJN nor its pilots asked for this in the specifications, but the Pacific War would prove the A6M's extreme vulnerability as a result. The A6M1 prototype's initial test flight was on March 23, 1939, but she could not break 304.47 miles per hour. The decision was made to use the Nakajima Sakae Type 12 engine for the A6M2, which managed a speed of 316.28 miles per hour. The results were so promising and the demands from the China front so high that the Naval Aeronautics Headquarters introduced preliminary A6Ms immediately into the combat zone. 15 hand-made pre-production prototype A6M2s were handed over to Admiral Shigetaro Shimada of the China Air Area Fleet. They would be flown by two groups of pilots, one led by Lieutenant Tamatsu Yokoyama of the Amura Kokutai, and 9 led by Lieutenant Saburo Sugindo of the Yokosuka Kokutai. The year 1940 was one of transition for the IJN's fighter force, with 153 A5M4s being produced against 95 of the new A6M2s. By August, A6M2 production would exceed the A5M4, while Horikoshi's teams were still working out glitches, but the urgency at the China front demanded the new aircraft. Though pronounced fit to fight, finding a Chinese enemy proved difficult as China's air policy was to avoid aerial combat. The first mission of the A6M2 took place on August 19th, with Lieutenant Yokoyama leading 12 A6M2s to escort 44 Mitsubishi G3M Rikko bombers for a bombing of Chongqing. The round trip was 1,118 miles, proving the ability of the single-engine aircraft to perform long-range actions. It was reported that 34 enemy aircraft awaited them, but none were found, seeing the G3M bombers dropping their payloads without incident. A few more missions were carried out with similar results, until September, when Lieutenant Yokoyama and Shindo laid a simple trap to lure out the reluctant warriors. On September 13th, 13 A6M2s mounted a raid against Chongqing. The bombing went as usual, and as the force was departing the area, a reconnaissance aircraft reported that Chinese aircraft were returning to the area after loitering for hours to the southwest. The A6M2 reversed course and took up a high-altitude watching position to the north of the city. 27 aircraft, I-15s and I-16s, returned to land at Chongqing, only to be pounced upon from higher altitudes by the A6M2s. Within 10 minutes, every Chinese aircraft was destroyed, without a single loss for the Japanese. The A6M2's speed allowed them to overtake the enemy, and the 20mm cannon quickly proved to have a decisive smashing power. The IJN was highly pleased with their debut and would summon the 3 main contributors to Tokyo on September 14th for a special commendation ceremony at the Navy Ministry, overseen by Vice Admiral Teijiro Toyoda. However, to conceal the new fighter's performance from potential enemies, the IJN hid the nickname the A6M had received for the time being, censoring it from the press, who simply referred to their victorious fighters and crews as Seahawks. Until May of 1940, the A6Ms had raided multiple Chinese cities and airfields across many provinces, and aided the southern expansion into French Indochina without losing a single A6M. However, on May 20th, 30 A6M2s raided parked aircraft at Schweneglin and Taipingsu fields in Chengdu when they suffered their first casualty. Petty Officer Eiichi Kimura was heavily hit by German-trained flak gunners, leading to his A6M crashing. The wreckage was located and examined by the Chinese, and this information was subsequently passed on to Singapore via Hong Kong before reaching London. The report from the British Air Attaché at Chongqing stated the performance figures for the aircraft were good by any standard. The Combined Air Intelligence Bureau forwarded the report, but failed to make much impression. Much has been made of the failure of British and American air intelligence to warn the Allies what they might face from the new IJN fighter. Before the outbreak of war in December of 1941, what did they know about the A6M? Some 18 months before the attack on Pearl Harbor, Western intelligence agencies sent multiple reports of a new Japanese fighter. The initial response was disbelief, but contrary to myths, many of these details were sent to frontline units, though few took notice of this. A mountain of reports reached the US Navy, and clearly channeled submitted numerous reports to the US Army about accounts from Chinese pilots who had survived dueling the new mysterious aircraft. In March of 1941, the US Army issued an updated edition of the identification series featuring known Japanese aircraft. The A6M appeared as Fighter 100. The next edition, which would come out 3 months into the war, would mention the A6M as the Nagoya Zero and wrongly attribute it as an IJA fighter. The name Zero came about from the A6M's type designation, Type Zero Carrier Fighter. Its official designation, A6M, was broken down from A, signifying carrier-based fighter, 6 being the 6th model built for the IJN, and M indicating Mitsubishi was its manufacturer. The Japanese colloquially called it Race-M. The Zero fighter became quickly feared during the early half of the war. The Zero could outturn a Spitfire easily, climb at steeper angles, and stay in the air for 3 times as long. The Zero provided air supremacy for the Japanese conquest of Malaya, and the Singapore campaign would cost Japan only 5 Zeros. The Dutch, primarily flying Brewster Buffaloes, were overwhelmed by the Zero fighters and easily brushed aside the ill-fated Abda command. During the raid on Darwin, 54 Zeros escorted and bombed her harbour, and of course famously 108 Zeros escorted and bombed Pearl Harbor, and 84 Zeros ushered in the disaster at Clark Field in the Philippines. During the battles of Coral Sea and Midway, US pilots were astounded by the Zero's superiority, quickly turning her into a legend. To combat such an enemy, Lieutenant Commander Jimmy Thatch developed the Thatch Weave to give American F-4F Wildcats more of a fighting chance at dogfighting the Zero. The first intact Zero to be captured by the Americans was the famous Akutan Zero, which crash-landed in July of 1942 on Akutan Island. After test flying and studying the aircraft, the US Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics and the Grumman Aircraft Company built an aircraft to surpass the Zero, the F-6F Hellcat. While the Zero fighter dominated the war until mid-1943, when aircraft like the Grumman F-6F Hellcat and Vought F-4U Corsair appeared in the Pacific Theatre, the Zero struggled to compete. The Zero remained in production until the war's end, with over 10,000 variants produced, and in the hands of capable pilots, remaining a threat to the Allies. We have already made videos on the F-2A and F-4Fs mentioned in this video, and are planning more videos on the weapons of the Pacific War, so subscribe and press the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently we have started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.